The mysterious return. The world was unprepared for what happened that day. It was just like any other morning on Earth, but everything changed in an instant. In the skies above, a spaceship appeared, descending slowly through the clouds. It was an old ship, damaged and weathered by time. But there was no mistaking it. It was the ship of an astronaut who had been lost in space over 300 years ago. His name was Captain Ethan Cole, and he had vanished during a mission meant to explore the farthest reaches of space. The mission was supposed to be quick, it was supposed to be safe, but somewhere, deep in the blackness of the universe, something went terribly wrong. The world had long believed that Ethan and his crew were gone forever, lost to the stars. Yet, here he was, alive, and not alone. The spaceship touched down gently on Earth, near an empty field in the middle of nowhere. The world watched in shock as the news spread like wildfire. How could this be? How could an astronaut who was supposed to be dead for centuries suddenly return? People scrambled to find answers, but no one knew what to believe. Was it really him? Was he even the same man who left so long ago? As the dust settled around the landing site, the doors of the spaceship slowly opened. There, standing at the threshold, was Captain Ethan Cole. His face was worn, his eyes tired, but there was no mistaking him. His uniform was faded and torn, but he looked exactly as the world remembered him, his features the same, his posture straight. It was as if he had stepped out of the past and into the present, as if time had forgotten to touch him. But there was one thing that made his return even stranger. Standing beside him was a woman, not a human woman, an alien. She was tall, with skin that shimmered like the stars, a deep violet hue that seemed to change with every movement. Her eyes glowed softly, almost as if they held the secrets of the universe. She was not dressed in the same way as Earthlings. Her clothing was sleek and metallic, unlike anything seen on Earth. Her presence was both beautiful and eerie, like something from a dream, or perhaps a nightmare. The world gasped in disbelief. Who was she? What was she doing with Ethan? Had he brought her back from space? And if so, why? The questions were endless, and the answers were nowhere to be found. At first, no one moved. The crowd that had gathered at the site stood frozen, unsure of what to do. The alien woman stood silently, her eyes scanning the crowd with an intensity that sent chills down their spines. Ethan slowly walked down the steps of the spaceship, his movements slow, deliberate. He didn't speak immediately. His eyes were filled with a mix of exhaustion and determination. He looked like a man who had seen things no one could imagine, a man who had lived through unimaginable hardships. And now he had returned to a world that had long forgotten him. He seemed to struggle with the weight of his return, but his face remained stoic. There was no smile, no sign of joy. Only the quiet realization that everything had changed. The silence between Ethan and the crowd stretched on for what felt like forever. Finally, he spoke, his voice hoarse from years of disuse. "I'm back," he said simply. "I've come home." But those words barely made an impact on the crowd. They were too busy looking at the alien woman beside him, wondering who she was, what she wanted, and whether she was a friend or foe. The air was thick with tension. Everyone knew that this was no ordinary return. This was something far bigger, something that none of them could fully understand. As the world began to react, scientists, military personnel, and world leaders scrambled to understand what had just happened. Was this a hoax? Was Ethan really the same man who had disappeared all those years ago? Was the woman with him a threat to humanity? The questions piled up, but no one had the answers. And as the day wore on, the truth seemed more and more elusive. In the days that followed, rumors spread. Some people claimed to have seen strange lights in the sky before Ethan's return. Others whispered about the mysterious technology the astronaut had encountered during his time in space. Had he discovered something out there, something that had changed him? And what about the alien woman? Was she an ally, or was she something far more dangerous? The world was on edge, unsure of what to make of the mysterious return. Some people welcomed Ethan with open arms, eager to hear his story and learn from his experiences. Others were more fearful, worried that this was the beginning of something they could not control. As the days turned into weeks, more questions arose than answers. What had happened to the astronaut during his years away? What was his connection to the alien woman? And most importantly, what did it all mean for the future of humanity? The world had no answers, but one thing was certain. Ethan Cole had returned, and the mysterious woman by his side would change everything. The astronaut's story. As the days passed after the shocking return of Captain Ethan Cole, the world remained in a state of confusion and anticipation. People from all corners of the Earth had gathered to learn more about the astronaut's story, eager to hear from the man who had been lost in space for so long. Yet Ethan kept his silence. He remained in a government facility, guarded and surrounded by scientists and military personnel, while the alien woman stayed close to him, offering no answers of her own. The world's eyes were fixed on the two of them, but there was only one question on everyone's mind. What had happened to Ethan Cole during his disappearance? What had he encountered out there in the void of space? Finally, after days of speculation and media frenzy, Ethan agreed to speak. His first public appearance was unlike anything anyone could have imagined. He stepped onto a stage before a massive audience, his eyes tired but resolute. The alien woman stood beside him, her silent gaze sweeping the crowd, as though she were observing their every move. Ethan's voice was calm, almost monotone. It was clear that he had lived through horrors far beyond what anyone could understand. "I know you all have questions," he began, his voice carrying a heavy weight. "I will answer as much as I can, but there are things that I can't explain. Not yet." The crowd hushed, hanging on every word. "For years, I drifted in space, lost and alone. My crew, they didn't make it. I don't know exactly how, but something happened. Something we weren't prepared for. Our mission was to explore a distant galaxy. We were supposed to return in a few months, but we were pulled off course by a force we couldn't control. We lost contact with Earth, and as time passed, we thought we were forgotten." His eyes grew distant as he spoke, a faraway look crossing his face. The alien woman remained still by his side, her expression unreadable. "We were stranded for a long time. It felt like centuries, though I'm sure it was less. Food and supplies ran out quickly, and we were forced to make choices. Hard choices. My crew, they didn't survive. I watched them die, one by one. It was a nightmare." The crowd leaned in closer, their curiosity growing with each word. Ethan continued, his voice cracking slightly. "Then she came, the woman standing beside me. I found her in the depths of space, a being unlike anything I had ever seen. She wasn't human. She wasn't from our galaxy, or even from this dimension. She saved me. She gave me a chance when all hope seemed lost." The room fell into a stunned silence. Who was this woman? How could she have possibly helped Ethan survive all those years in space? Ethan glanced at her, a silent understanding passing between them. The alien woman's eyes softened, but she did not speak. Ethan's story was far from over, but the truth was too complex to put into words. "I don't fully understand what she is, or where she comes from," Ethan admitted, his voice low. "But I know one thing. She has knowledge of things beyond our understanding, and I owe my life to her." At this moment, the tension in the room shifted. The world had been eagerly waiting for an explanation, but now there were more questions than answers. Who was the alien woman? Why had she chosen to save Ethan? And what was the mysterious connection between them? Ethan's story was just beginning, but the answers were nowhere to be found. People were left with a sense of awe, confusion, and fear. If this was the beginning of something much bigger, then what would come next? Would humanity be ready for the revelations that were yet to come? As the press conference ended, the questions only grew. The truth about the astronaut's survival remained a mystery, and the world could only wait for the next chapter of this extraordinary story. But one thing was clear. Captain Ethan Cole's return had set in motion something far more significant than anyone could have imagined. And the alien woman standing beside him was the key to understanding it all. The alien's silence. As days turned into weeks, the world began to observe more than just the astronaut's presence. They also watched the alien woman closely. Though she stood by Captain Ethan Cole, she remained as silent and mysterious as the stars themselves. Her quiet demeanor was unlike anything anyone had ever seen. She had not spoken a word since her arrival, not in front of the media, nor in the presence of the world leaders and scientists who were trying to uncover her secrets. Despite her silence, her presence was undeniable. She moved with a fluid grace, as though she was part of something far beyond human comprehension. Every glance she gave seemed to hold centuries of wisdom. Yet the more people tried to communicate with her, the more distant and unreachable she seemed. Every time someone tried to ask her questions, whether it was through gestures, speech, or technology, she remained silent, her eyes deep and unwavering. Scientists and linguists from around the world attempted every method to understand her, but each effort failed. Translators tried different languages, speaking to her in every tongue they knew, but she gave no response. Her eyes never seemed to blink, yet they carried an otherworldly depth, as though she could see into the hearts of those who attempted to communicate with her. But not a single word escaped her lips. The silence grew unsettling. As time passed, the world began to feel an unease surrounding the alien woman. Was she even capable of speaking? Or was she simply choosing not to? What was her purpose on Earth? Why had she chosen to accompany Ethan back to their planet? Ethan, too, was perplexed by her silence. He had spoken of her as though she was his savior, his companion, and his protector. But even he could not explain why she refused to speak. She had been with him throughout his journey, but there was no indication that she was being forced to remain quiet. It seemed as though she was simply waiting. While the world debated and speculated about the alien woman's silence, a strange calmness seemed to hang over her. People had expected answers, yet she remained a puzzle with no clear solution. She never displayed any signs of aggression or hostility. In fact, she seemed to be observant, taking in everything around her with a quiet, intense focus. Whether it was a group of scientists or the public watching from afar, she observed every interaction, every person, but never once did she offer a word in response. Ethan, on the other hand, began to show signs of frustration. He spoke to her often, in private, as though he was trying to coax something, anything, from her. But she remained silent, her eyes never leaving him, but her lips still sealed. To those who witnessed these moments, it was as if she were waiting for something. But what? In one private conversation, Ethan seemed to finally reach a breaking point. His voice cracked as he spoke to her, his words laced with desperation. "Why won't you say anything?" he asked, his eyes pleading. "Why did you come with me if you don't want to help? The world needs to understand. You don't have to hide." For a moment, the alien woman looked at him, her gaze intense and full of a strange, unspoken knowledge. But she said nothing. Instead, she reached out slowly, touching Ethan's arm with a soft gesture, as if to comfort him. The world outside would never know what passed between them in that moment, but for Ethan, it was clear that she wasn't ready to reveal everything. Not yet. And so, the silence continued. As weeks passed, the tension around her only grew. Media outlets, social networks, and governments debated endlessly about her. Was she a threat? Was she waiting for the right moment to speak? What was she observing? Some even speculated that perhaps she didn't know how to communicate with humans at all, that her silence was simply a barrier between two very different species. Others whispered that her silence might be part of some grander plan, a strategy to keep the world in suspense. The alien woman, however, remained unbothered. She seemed to exist outside the concerns of the humans around her. Even in her silence, There was an unspoken power. It was as though she knew something the world didn't, and that knowledge was hidden beneath the quiet calm of her presence. Meanwhile, Ethan began to grow more anxious. The people he had once trusted, the world that had once been his, were beginning to view him with suspicion. Was he being manipulated? Was his journey in space something far darker than he had let on? Why had he brought back this mysterious alien being? But through it all, Ethan remained resolute. He knew that the answers lay with her, answers he himself didn't fully understand. But he was willing to wait. He was certain that the alien woman had something important to reveal. But when would she speak? And would the world be ready for the truth she held within her silence? The waiting game continued. Tension built. But for now, all the world could do was watch and wonder. What would happen when the alien woman finally chose to break her silence? Strange power. Weeks passed, and the silence surrounding the alien woman began to feel even more oppressive. The world's eyes were still on her, watching her every movement, waiting for any hint of her purpose. Yet, no answers came. Instead, something far stranger began to unfold. The alien woman, despite her silence, started to show signs of having powers that no human could explain. It began with small, subtle events, things that no one could truly understand, at least not yet. One morning, a scientist working in the same facility as the astronaut and the alien woman had a sudden accident. He tripped and fell, landing hard on his arm. The pain was immediate, and he cried out in agony. A few people rushed to help him, but there was little they could do. His arm was obviously broken, the bone visible through the skin. Without a word, the alien woman stepped forward. She approached the scientist, her steps silent, as if she had not even touched the ground. The room fell into complete stillness. She reached out with her hand, placing it gently over the injured arm. The room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the pain seemed to subside. The man's breathing steadied, his body relaxing. The broken bone began to mend, the skin knitting itself back together in a way that could only be described as impossible. Within moments, the man's arm was healed. He stood up, amazed, moving it around as if nothing had ever happened. The room erupted in shock. The scientist, who had been in unbearable pain moments ago, was now completely fine. His arm was as good as new. No one could explain what had just happened. How could this alien woman possess such an ability? Was it technology, magic, or something else entirely? This wasn't the only strange event to occur. In the following days, similar occurrences took place. People with minor injuries, burns, or wounds found themselves healed in moments after the alien woman's touch. She never spoke a word or explained her actions, but her powers were undeniable. It wasn't just physical healing. Some reports began to surface that she had predicted events before they happened. A scientist would make a mistake during an experiment, and she would look at them with a knowing gaze, warning them just before the error occurred. Others claimed to have had strange dreams after coming into contact with her. In their dreams, they saw glimpses of distant stars, of ancient civilizations, and of a future where humanity was no longer alone in the universe. These visions were vivid, terrifying, and awe-inspiring, leaving those who experienced them shaken to their core. Were these dreams simply a side effect of their encounter with an alien being, or was there something more profound at play? Even more startling was her ability to sense things that no one could have known. During a private meeting with Ethan, she reached out and touched his chest, her fingers resting on the spot where he had once been wounded during the early days of his journey. Ethan flinched as memories of the pain flooded back, but there was no sign of injury. In fact, the place where he had once been hurt felt warm, as though it had never been touched by suffering. As time went on, it became clearer that the alien woman wasn't just a traveler from another world. She was something much more. She had abilities that defied all human understanding, and it was becoming evident that her powers were not limited to healing or foresight. There was something deeper, something far more dangerous or potentially valuable, hidden within her. Ethan himself was becoming increasingly fascinated and troubled by her powers. He had seen her do things that should have been impossible, and he knew the world had no frame of reference for such abilities. But as incredible as they were, there was a dark edge to them. If she could heal, what else could she do? What other powers did she possess that no one knew about? The governments of Earth, meanwhile, were growing more concerned. Scientists began scrambling to study her, to unlock the secrets behind her powers. But despite their best efforts, she remained a mystery. Every test, every attempt to understand her, only led to more questions. Was she from an advanced civilization, with technology and knowledge far beyond humanity's reach? Or was there something else at work here, something more than technology, something that tapped into the very fabric of the universe? The more they tried to study her, the more it became clear that she was not just an alien. She was a force of nature, something that had come from beyond the stars with an agenda of her own. And as her powers grew stronger, the world began to realize that they were no longer in control of the situation. Whatever came next, humanity would have to learn to accept that their world was about to change forever. As strange occurrences continued to unfold and the alien woman's powers grew more apparent, the question remained, what was she preparing humanity for? What role did she play in Ethan's return, and why had she chosen now to reveal her abilities? And perhaps the most terrifying thought of all, what would happen when she finally chose to speak? Tensions rise. As the alien woman's powers became more apparent, the world's reaction became more intense. What had begun as awe and wonder quickly shifted to fear and suspicion. The media was filled with headlines questioning her true purpose, and governments scrambled to prepare for the unknown. Military officials and world leaders began to discuss what the future might hold if this alien force was not only capable of healing and predicting events, but if she could also possess other potentially dangerous abilities. It wasn't just her powers that had the world on edge. It was the fact that she was so unyielding in her silence. No one knew if she could be reasoned with, or if she even understood the consequences of her actions. She had not spoken a single word since her arrival, and each day that passed without an explanation only added to the rising tension. The atmosphere in the government facility where Ethan and the alien woman were kept was growing increasingly hostile. Rumors circulated that certain factions within the government wanted to detain her, to study her powers in a more controlled environment, perhaps even to weaponize them. Others feared that any attempt to do so would provoke her, possibly triggering an event that could lead to the end of humanity as they knew it. But it wasn't just the authorities who were worried. Ordinary citizens began to grow restless as well. Those who had initially welcomed Ethan's return with excitement now questioned whether the astronaut himself had been altered during his time in space. Was he still the same man who had left Earth centuries ago? Was he now working in cahoots with the alien woman for some greater purpose? The public was divided, and chaos began to brew as fear spread across the globe. Ethan found himself caught in the middle of a growing storm. He had once been hailed as a hero, but now some viewed him with suspicion. The alien woman who had saved his life and kept him alive in the vast emptiness of space was now seen by many as a threat. And no matter how hard he tried to explain his side of the story, the questions kept piling up. "Ethan, you have to understand," one government official said during a tense meeting. "The world is terrified. You've been gone for centuries, and now you've returned with an alien woman who can heal the wounded, predict the future, and control things we don't even comprehend. People are afraid." "I know they're afraid," Ethan replied, his voice low and strained. "But she's not our enemy. She saved me. I owe her my life. She's not like anything I've ever seen, but that doesn't mean she's here to harm us." "I'm not sure they'll believe that, Captain," the official said, looking down at the report in front of him. "There are already talks about what we should do if things escalate." Ethan looked toward the door where the alien woman stood, her silent gaze fixed on him. Her calmness contrasted sharply with the turmoil around them. He could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He knew that he needed to protect her, but he also needed to protect humanity from the unknown. At the same time, the alien woman had become a symbol of fear and uncertainty. Her silence only fueled speculation. Some believed she was a messenger, a harbinger of something terrible. Others believed she was an advanced being sent to guide humanity into a new era of peace and prosperity. But the longer she remained silent, the more the world feared that her true intentions might be darker than anyone could imagine. Public protests began to break out in various cities. Some people demanded that the government take action, that they detain the alien woman and study her to learn how to harness her powers. Others rallied in support of her, declaring that she was a savior who had come to protect Earth from an unknown threat. As the days went by, the pressure mounted, and the tensions between factions only deepened. Ethan could see the divide growing wider and wider. He knew that no matter what, the situation couldn't remain as it was. If something didn't change soon, the world would tear itself apart in its search for answers. But the answers weren't something that could be forced. They would come when the alien woman was ready to reveal them. But when? During one of their private moments, Ethan tried again, speaking to her with the same pleading tone he had used before. "Please, tell me what's going on. The world doesn't understand you, and neither do I. But we need to know. I need to know what you're preparing us for. Why did you bring me back? Why are you here?" Her gaze softened for a moment, but she remained silent. It was as if she were weighing his words, considering them carefully, before deciding once again that the time was not right. Ethan felt a sharp pang of frustration. Was she simply waiting for something? Did she need something to trigger her decision to finally speak? Every day that passed seemed to deepen the mystery, but also the urgency. Time was running out, and the longer she remained silent, the closer the world came to a breaking point. He couldn't stay in this limbo much longer. He had to get through to her, a hidden truth. The world's fear and uncertainty had reached a boiling point. Governments, military leaders, and scientists were all desperate for answers. They had waited, watched, and speculated for months, but the silence from the alien woman remained unbroken. The tension was palpable. People were starting to demand action. The peaceful protests for the alien woman's safety were met with violent opposition from those who feared the unknown. Ethan, who had once been the beacon of hope, now felt the weight of the world bearing down on him. He stood between two forces, struggling to maintain peace while protecting the woman who had saved him from death in space. But every day that passed without answers made it more difficult to hold back the rising storm. Inside the government facility, tensions continued to rise. Military leaders discussed the possibility of taking drastic action, while scientists worked tirelessly to understand the alien woman's powers. But none of them could decipher what she was truly capable of. No one had a clear idea of what she was waiting for, and no one could understand why she had come to Earth. One evening, in a quiet corner of the facility, Ethan sat alone, his hands resting on the table in front of him. He had spent countless hours in thought, trying to piece together everything he had learned from the alien woman. There had to be something he was missing, something important she had left unsaid. Then, unexpectedly, the alien woman appeared in the doorway. She stood silently, as she always did, but this time there was something different in the air. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. Was she finally ready to speak? The alien woman walked toward him, her steps as graceful as ever. She stopped just in front of him and extended her hand. For a moment, Ethan hesitated, unsure if this gesture was a sign of trust or something more cryptic. But his instincts told him to take her hand. The moment their hands touched, a flood of images and emotions surged through Ethan's mind. It was as if he had been transported into another world, a world where stars burned brighter and civilizations were born and destroyed in the blink of an eye. He saw glimpses of distant galaxies, of wars fought in the vacuum of space, of ancient beings whose powers far exceeded anything humanity could comprehend. But then something else emerged, a vision of Earth, but not the Earth that existed now. This was a future Earth, one that had been ravaged and changed by forces beyond human understanding. There was destruction everywhere, and humanity was on the brink of extinction. The alien woman stood at the center of it all, her eyes filled with sorrow and determination. Ethan gasped, his breath caught in his chest. The vision faded as quickly as it had come, leaving him shaken and disoriented. He pulled his hand away, but the feeling lingered like a ghost that refused to leave him. The alien woman looked at him with those deep, glowing eyes, and for the first time, her silence was broken. Her voice, when it finally came, was not what he had expected. It was soft, but full of an ancient wisdom that seemed to echo through time. "You are not ready for what is to come," she said, her words slow and deliberate. "But you will be. I have seen it." Ethan could barely comprehend what he had just experienced. What? What do you mean? What is coming?" She took a step back, her gaze shifting to the horizon beyond the facility, as if she were seeing something far beyond the walls. "A great darkness is coming," she said, her voice tinged with sadness. "I was sent to prepare you, to prepare Earth for what is to come. You are the key. You, Ethan Cole." Ethan's mind was racing. "What do you mean, I'm the key? What do I have to do?" But the alien woman did not answer him directly. Instead, she closed her eyes for a moment, and when she opened them again, her expression was filled with both urgency and caution. "You must learn to trust. Trust in yourself and in those around you. You have been chosen, but it will not be easy. The path ahead is fraught with danger. But if you fail, the future of Earth will be lost." The gravity of her words hit Ethan like a hammer. He had always known that his return would not be without consequence, but he had never imagined it would be like this. A darkness, a threat to humanity's very existence, was coming, and he, and the alien woman, were the only ones who could stand against it. "Why me?" Ethan asked, still struggling to understand the significance of her words. She looked at him with a deep sadness in her eyes. "Because you were lost. You were lost for a reason. You are the bridge between humanity and what comes next. But time is running out." Ethan's mind was still reeling from the vision, from the realization that the woman beside him had not only saved his life, but had brought him back for something much greater. He had a purpose, a role to play in saving Earth, but the weight of that responsibility felt almost too much to bear. The alien woman stepped closer, her voice softening. "You will not do this alone. There are others like you, who will help. But the first step is to awaken what lies dormant within you. You must understand your true strength, Ethan. You must be ready." With those final words, she turned and walked away, leaving Ethan standing alone, with more questions than answers. The truth had been revealed, but the journey ahead was far from clear. What was this darkness that threatened Earth, and how could Ethan possibly be the key to stopping it? The answers were out there, but they were hidden in a future that only the alien woman could truly see. And as the days passed, Ethan realized that he would have to trust in her guidance, no matter how impossible the path seemed. The future of humanity was on his shoulders, and the first step was about to begin. The final choice. The world stood on the edge of a precipice. Ethan's newfound knowledge, combined with the alien woman's cryptic warnings, had shaken him to his core. The dark force she spoke of was not some far-off threat. It was already moving, slowly creeping toward Earth, its influence spreading across the universe. But the full scope of the danger was still unclear. The alien woman had told him that he, Ethan Cole, was the key to stopping it. But how could he possibly stand against something so powerful, so unknown? The days following their conversation were filled with chaos. Governments across the world began to act with a sense of urgency they had never felt before. New alliances were formed between nations, pooling their resources in preparation for what was to come. But no one had a clear plan. No one knew what they were up against. Ethan was pulled in many directions. He had been a hero once, the astronaut who had defied the odds. But now he was faced with a responsibility much greater than any mission he had ever embarked on. The alien woman had told him that he was not alone in this battle, that there were others like him, people with hidden potential who would stand with him against the coming darkness. But where were they? And who were they? Ethan tried to reach out, seeking answers, but the alien woman remained distant. She had told him that he needed to unlock his true strength. But how? What did it mean to awaken something dormant within himself? The weight of the mystery hung over him, and every moment felt like it could be the last before the darkness arrived. Then, one night, he received a message, an encrypted transmission from an unknown source. It was a warning, a call to action. The message spoke of an ancient war, a conflict between powerful alien forces that had raged across the stars for millennia. The darkness that the alien woman had spoken of was part of this war, an ancient evil that had been sealed away long ago, but now it was beginning to awaken, and Earth was caught in the middle of it. The message also contained a series of coordinates, a location deep within the heart of the planet's oceans. There, hidden beneath layers of rock and water, was something that could give Ethan the power to fight back. A hidden artifact, an object of immense power that had been left behind by an advanced civilization long before humanity existed. Ethan knew what he had to do. He gathered a team of trusted allies, some of the world's best scientists, military leaders, and a few people who had started to emerge with strange abilities, those who had been touched by the same force that the alien woman seemed to represent. Together, they would travel to the coordinates and retrieve the artifact. The journey was perilous. As they descended into the depths of the ocean, strange phenomena began to occur. The sea itself seemed to react to their presence, growing more turbulent as they neared the artifact. At times, the waters would churn violently, threatening to tear their vessel apart, as if something beneath the waves was aware of their intrusion. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, they reached the site. There, hidden within a massive underwater cavern, they found it, the artifact. It was unlike anything Ethan had ever seen. It pulsed with an unnatural energy, its surface smooth and shimmering with iridescent light. He could feel its power even before he touched it. This was what the alien woman had meant when she said he needed to awaken something within himself. But as he reached out to grasp the artifact, something happened. A surge of energy coursed through his body, and the world around him seemed to warp and bend. The power of the artifact flooded him, unlocking something deep within his mind, a connection to the alien woman and to the ancient force that had been watching over him all along. In that moment, Ethan understood. The darkness was not just a physical enemy. It was a force that sought to consume everything, to erase the light of civilization, and plunge the universe into chaos. The artifact was not just a weapon. It was a key to unlocking the hidden potential within humanity, the strength that could resist the darkness. As the energy surged through him, Ethan was flooded with visions of battles fought across the stars, of civilizations rising and falling, of great victories and devastating losses. He saw the alien woman's role in this cosmic war, her sacrifice to keep the darkness at bay. And he saw his own destiny, a path that would lead him to become the leader humanity needed to face the coming storm. He held the artifact in his hands, feeling its power, and knew what he had to do. The time for waiting was over. He was no longer just an astronaut, lost in space. He was a warrior, a defender of Earth, chosen to lead humanity into a battle against an ancient evil that threatened everything they knew. When he returned to the surface, the alien woman was waiting for him. Her eyes met his, and for the first time, he saw something akin to approval in her gaze. She had known all along that he had the strength within him. It was only a matter of time before he realized it for himself. "We are ready," Ethan said, his voice filled with newfound confidence. "The darkness will come, but we will stand against it, together." And with that, the final choice had been made. The battle had begun.